Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight for Anna Suhoy's Hammer Talk. My name is Rebecca Morris, and I am the chair of the Department of Art, and it is my huge honor and my great pleasure to introduce my colleague and dear friend, Anna. Anna Suhoy is currently an associate professor of ceramics within the Department of Art. She joined the faculty at UCLA in the fall of 2019, the same year I did. It was a genuine coincidence. We had each applied independently for our positions, Anna in ceramics and me in painting. We joked about how amazing it would be if we both were hired, and we were. And now, in my role as chair, I have this very special privilege of introducing her tonight. And just to clarify, when I say that we are close friends, I really mean it. Like, I brought over 5 gallons of Rocky Road ice cream as soon as her second child was born. Anna and I met in 2005, 21 years ago, when I invited her to participate in a 3-person exhibition at Midway Contemporary in Minneapolis. And despite both of us living in Los Angeles, we hadn't yet met. But I had been hearing about her, how cool she was, and how amazing her work was. The show was titled Diamond Hand Grenade. Anna made and designed the card. It included me, Catherine Bernhardt, and Anna. For that exhibition, Anna was building a truly wild sculpture in the middle of the gallery, a tree that held a constellation of her hanging dream catcher sculptures. Around it were placed her other freestanding sculptures and Catherine and my paintings. The tree was ambitious, a little crazy, and completely compelling. The press release of the exhibition cited her work being, quote, inspired by a noir reading of certain aspects of the nightlife of Los Angeles' Elysian Park, from collected and found objects such as stickers, jewelry, perfume bottles, feathers, and clothing that are then fused into or woven into the surfaces of natural forms, such as evergreen logs or handmade clay forms. Looking back, these works feel like formal and conceptual blueprints for works she is still making today. To situate that practice more broadly, it helps to begin with her background. Anna Suhoy was born in Auckland, New Zealand, and received her BFA from the School of Visual Arts in New York and her MFA from Bard College. Suhoy's work explores how perception, language, and feeling take shape in the body and in psychic forms of the self. Working across sculpture, ceramics, performance, and public art, she investigates our relationship to the environment and the subtle power of what is fleeting, handmade, and in process. Her practice has been central to a renewed engagement with clay in contemporary art, pushing the medium beyond traditional pottery into experimental sculptural forms that blur the boundaries between art and craft. A defining feature of Suhoy's work is her combination of hand-built clay with materials drawn from everyday urban life, computer parts, fabric, chains, and denim. This juxtaposition creates a tension between the slow, labor-intensive nature of ceramics and the speed and disposability of contemporary culture. Her sculptures often evoke the human body while remaining deliberately open and ambiguous, moving between abstraction and figuration. In doing so, they probe the relationship between interior and exterior space, as well as between physical and psychological states. As Suhoy has said herself, it is good to let everything in, it makes the soup richer. International solo presentations of Anna's work have been mounted at the institutional solo presentations of Anna's work have been mounted at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Aspen Art Museum, the San Jose Museum of Art. Solo gallery exhibitions include Commonwealth and Council, various small fires, Koenig and Clinton, Romer Young Gallery, Sycamore Jenkins, Karen Lovegrove, and Perez projects, amongst others. Her work has been included in group exhibitions internationally at venues such as Here at the Hammer, the Asia Society in New York, LACMA, the 2008 California Biennial at the Orange County Museum of Art, the American Academy of Arts and Letters, Maxi Museum in Rome, Moran, Sacco Gallery in Kyoto, artist-curated projects, the Ben Maltz Gallery at Otis, and Soccer Club, to name a few. Anna also creates large-scale public installations, including Psychic Body Grotto, which is at the Los Angeles State Historic Park. Other commissions include projects at the Sculpture Park at Art Omai, the University of California, Riverside, and the Candlewood Arts Festival in Borrego Springs. Alongside her studio and public work, Suhoi maintains an active engagement with performance and collaboration. A key framework for this is FXR, a collective of artists and educators that include A. Arakawa Nash, Patty Chang, Pearl Seung, Amanda Ross Ho, Shirley Zay, Amy Yao, and Suhoi. Their collaboration is shaped by shared experiences as teachers, artists, parents, and caregivers across Southern California, and their projects reflect on the demands of continuous care while proposing more reciprocal and sustained forms of support within artistic and local communities. Selected projects include Force Ghosts, FAC Extra Retreat, FXR, Get Back, Get Out, and 24-Hour Care, as well as the upcoming Grass Babies, Moon Babies to be presented at the Japanese Pavilion of the 61st International Art Exhibition at the Venice Biennale. As a curator, Suhoi recently co-led the groundbreaking Scratching at the Moon exhibition at the Institute of Contemporary Art Los Angeles with Anne Elgood, the first focused survey of Asian American artists at a major Los Angeles institution. The exhibition celebrated 13 intergenerational artists, highlighting not only their practice, but their roles as mentors and community builders. Running for 6 months, it drew nearly 10,000 visitors, hosted 25 public programs, and was supported by the Andy Warhol Foundation, as well as receiving the Fellows of Contemporary Arts Curator Award. Suhoi's work is included in the permanent collections of the Hammer Museum, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, LACMA, and MoCA San Diego. Her honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship of Visual Art, the Anonymous Was a Woman Award, a Creative Capital Grant for Visual Art, the California Community Foundation Grant for Emerging Artists, and the inaugural Martha Longenecker Roth Distinguished Artist in Residence at the University of California, San Diego, as well as a United States Artist Fellowship. All of this, her material inventiveness, her commitment to collaboration, and her deep engagement with care, community, and making gives us a sense of just how expansive Anna's practice is. But of course, the best way to experience that is to hear it from herself. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Anna Suhoi.
Wow, thank you, Rebecca. That was the best introduction I've ever received. It's amazing. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I wanted to say thank you to the Hammer team for facilitating this talk. I'm thrilled that it's finally happening. It's a long time coming. Thank you to UCLA, to our staff, my colleagues, and students, all for sharing and supporting my research. And also, my mom, Betty, is here, who is an incredible maker and cook, with our neighbor, Joan, a writer who used to loan me books growing up. I'd like to dedicate this talk to Betty and Joan. This is a piece by Jackie Windsor called Bound Square from 1972. It's about 9 feet tall. She was my teacher, and I was also her archivist for a couple of years. Jackie's work was called post-minimalist, which to me means working with essential forms while still dealing with gender, ecology, and entropy, allowing presence and life back into the concerns of the work. Here, the making of the object is revealed by looking. Its process is fully transparent and legible. This is another work by Jackie Windsor called Burnt Peace from 1977, 1978. It's made of concrete, wood, and wire and is 36 inches cubed. It was built in the studio by Jackie and then taken outside and burned. I spent my 20s in New York City. At night, I went to Anthology Film Archives on 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street, where my best friend, Stom Stogo, was a projectionist. I spent many late nights absorbing Anthology's essential cinema. I had never seen anything like it growing up adjacent to Hollywood. Stom was a friend and mentee of Jonas Mekas, and they both made daily journal films using Super 8 cameras. Jonas was a refugee from Soviet-occupied Lithuania. He and his brother gave experimental cinema a home in New York City in the 60s with Anthology Film Archives and the Film Co-op. He also founded the seminal journal Film Culture. This is a still of Ya Private Sky from 2001 by Stom Stogo, and it's made of Super 8 film and mini DV. Stom made kind of extreme flicker films with intense layers of light and imagery and ear-piercing sound. His images shot from life would be layered and abstracted by re-recording projected images at different speeds. This work is by Patty Chang called Melons at a Loss from 1998. I encountered Patty's work at Exit Art in New York City. The short video shows Patty eating cantaloupe from her own breast, plate balanced on her head, telling the story of her aunt who died of breast cancer. Patty uses her body in uncomfortable situations to process uncomfortable and painful experiences. This is an example of my early work from 2002. It's called Berg, and it was exhibited at my very first solo show at Massimo Audiello Fine Art in New York. I was getting around mostly on a streak bike at the time, and I was inspired by speed, momentum, and a fascination with impact and crashing. A friend sent me some writing about this work recently, and here's an excerpt. A rock comes alive from the sludge at the bottom of the East River and wraps around a kiddie bike, crushing it. Or you run a red light, swerve to avoid a sob on your left, and slam into a boulder that takes over your body. In the street, dirt piles and old bricks look just like a sculpture or a good place to ride your bike. A rock is a weight, momentum when it's hurtling through space, a beautiful form, a weapon. Momentum, gravity, air, memory, shivering, dissolving. A handful of sand is thrown into the sky, touches the sun, and becomes glass. In 2002, 1 year after 9/11, when the Twin Towers fell and New York and the country were irrevocably changed, I moved back to Los Angeles. I began collaborating with Fritz Haig, who was hosting sundown salons at his place on Sundown Drive in Mount Washington. Artists and makers who lived nearby participated or attended. This was when the art scene in LA felt hyper-local before New York and international galleries set up shop to establish a bigger art market. And pictured here is a performance in Fritz's terraced garden. And this is where I met at Fritz's many of my LA art friends, such as Jade, Malik, and Alex of My Barbarian, and Eve Fowler. And we're looking at a picture of Katie Grinnan with her sculpture at an event at Fritz's place called Radical Gardening. In the aughts, we were making things and exhibitions for just each other in Chinatown, Echo Park, East Hollywood. ACP, which is also called Artist Curated Projects, was started by Eve Fowler and Lucas Michael, who are in the center of this image. And this image was taken for Interview magazine in 2010 in a feature about artist curated projects. And ACP was started in Eve's apartment in order to showcase mostly queer artist friends who weren't represented by a commercial gallery. I hosted an ACP show at my house in '08 called Kimono My House, after the song by the Sparks. And you can see Young in the middle row on the left, who went on to create Commonwealth and Council Gallery, where I'm now represented. I brought a solo show of Pearl Shung's work to Human Resources in 2014, and Pearl is in the bottom row in the middle. I think of my friendships with these artists as lifelong collaborations, which at various times result in something public out in the world. You probably see some other familiar faces. There's Catherine Lord and Yenny Min. These were the people that were supported by ACP. And there were more. Those are just the people that stayed long enough for that photo shoot, which went late, I remember. I began thinking more expansively on what I could make outside. I live near the LA River, and it's a big inspiration to me. It's where land and water and civilizing forces and chaotic forces come together. My kids grew up riding bikes along this river. I began to envision a structure not unlike a cockpit from which to experience the river and its surrounds, something architectural in scale that was not grandiose public art towering above us. Instead, this structure would envelop the viewer, offering a shelter for repose while being outside. That's Io a long time ago. He's 11 now. I called this artwork Io, and then the other artwork Psychic Body Grotto. And this is an image of the 50% scale model of the piece. And its purpose is to create possibility for new movement, invented ritual, and for a kind of gathering that is yet to occur while being in tune with the outside environment. Psychic Body Grotto is made of gestural arches without walls or 90-degree angles. With support from a Creative Capital Award, which was matched by land, I was able to create Psychic Body Grotto from plaster maquette to full-scale plaster original to the finished cast bronze. Land's mission is to get artwork outside of normal exhibition spaces, and they helped me connect with the LA State Historic Park to site the sculpture near the river as I'd envisioned years before. The park is north of Chinatown, and its northern tip is about 150 feet from the LA River, so it follows that this fertile region was the location of one of the largest villages of Tongva tribe. It is surrounded by the ethnically diverse neighborhoods of Lincoln Heights, Elysian Park, Solano Canyon, Chinatown, and Chavez Ravine. And when people were migrating west in the 1800s, this was the site of the Southern Pacific's river station, and when you got here, you had arrived. You were as west as you could be. During the creation of the park, workers uncovered ruins of the train yard and have left them to be part of the environment. And this is a map that shows the parkland in green with the Blue River running alongside. Dodger Stadium is to the northwest and Union Station is to the south. Around the 1990s, this land was going to be sold by the city to developers who intended to build upscale residential units. The people living around this land were fighting for green space for their children. Because their neighborhoods didn't have any. After the protracted efforts of civil rights activists, people from the neighborhood, and environmental justice groups that took almost 20 years, the city finally transferred this parcel to the state parks. So the people who fought so long won the right to green space for their grandchildren in the end. The Downtown State Historic Park opened on Earth Day in 2017. And here is a process shot from 2016 of the making of the full-size plaster original in my home studio, which would be cast in bronze. And in the back, working with me, is Maria Piñeras. And this is the plaster original near the finish stage. And then it was chopped up here in about 3-foot sections and transferred to Ventura at Artisan Bronze, where each piece was cast separately in bronze and then it was welded back together. And so this is an image of all the welds being chased. After patina stage, then it was transported back to LA, and this is an extending forklift that was used to drop the piece onto the site. Much of the parkland is protected from motor vehicles because of the native plantings and the existence of ruins in the ground, so we needed this special piece of equipment. And this is the fresh install looking north towards the river. And this is Corey Fogel performing during the opening ceremonies on May 21st, 2017. We held an opening ceremonies for Psychic Body Grotto, where I invited artists to create performances in and around the piece. And so here is Corey playing the sculpture. And this is LA Fog performing in Psychic Body Grotto. You can still visit the sculpture today. People meet there at sunset or in the morning for coffee. Kids love running up and down that shallow bowl made of decomposed granite. And I've even been sent pictures of people having their wedding photos in the sculpture, using it as exercise structure, and people leave bundles of sage there. It is definitely well used for things that I could never have imagined before I made it. In 2020, I started a series called Cage Grottos, which has evolved over a period of years. It began with a prompt from artists Mary Ellen Carroll and Lucas Michael, who collected artist responses to the accounts of unaccompanied immigrant children detained at the border with Mexico. These sworn testimonies are called the Flores exhibits, and they're of children held in detention centers at the U.S. border with Mexico. And this is a sample of what is in them. It's very crowded with about 50 boys. There's no room to move without stepping on others. We sleep on the cold concrete floor. I'm afraid of the guards. On Saturday, I was trying to leave our cell to go to the bathroom, and a guard said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the bathroom." He said, "You don't even say thank you." Then he pushed me in the chest back into the cell and slammed the door. After that, they locked the door to the cell, and we have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. I don't want to ask to go to the bathroom because I'm afraid they're going to yell at us. The little boy that I'm taking care of never speaks. He likes for me to hold him as much as possible. My response was to draw cages within my architecture of arches, writing out bits of testimonies on the drawings. I then started working dimensionally, sculpting the clay arches around found metal pet cages and bits of industrial mesh. I started small, about the size of a desktop monitor. I couldn't predict how the clay and the metal would affect each other dramatically and dynamically. Clay contracts as it dries, but in this case couldn't shrink with the metal cages holding it in place. Instead, it cracked. When I fired these, the metal warped and became brittle at 860 degrees. It was amazing to warp the metal grids this way to find openings in the cages. And this piece is from 2021, and it's called Time is a Prius. This piece is called Digital Ocean Spawn from 2022, and it is about twice as big. So I'm scaling up now, and the work is now embedded in a ground of hydrostone, which is plaster and cement combination material. As I continued, I realized that with this work, I'm merely setting up a situation, and then the kiln responds as its extreme heat warps and transforms the piece. You could argue that this is somewhat true in all ceramics, but it's especially true with these works. I started calling these works growing ruins after a while because cage grottos didn't seem as good. And this one is even bigger than the last, and it was commissioned by SF MoMA in 2023, and it's called Heavy Sun and Commotion. How can we placemake using what is around us? These are images of survival and perhaps even thriving in the Anthropocene. That's what I think when I look at these sculptures. In 2020, the ceramics grads, Candace and I, read Mushroom at the End of the World by Anna Singh, which uses the matsutake as a focal point for exploring what Singh describes as the end of capitalist progress as ecological degradation and economic precarity proliferate. Singh highlights the resilience of the matsutake, a delicacy in Japan which humans have found cannot be cultivated, and those who forage for them in the spent pine forests of the Pacific Northwest, where they flourish. They love to grow on dead pine trees, fallen dead pine trees. Many of the mushroom foragers are Hmong refugees of war. Here are entanglements between and codependency of various species, not only surviving precarious and disturbed environments, but creating new environments. Singh writes, one could say that pines, matsutake, and humans, all cultivate each other unintentionally. They make each other's world-making projects possible. This idiom has allowed me to consider how landscapes more generally are products of unintentional design, that is, the overlapping world-making activities of many agents, human and not human. The design is clear in the landscape's ecosystem, but none of the agents have planned this effect. Humans join others in making landscapes of unintentional design. As sites for more than human dramas, landscapes are radical tools for decentering human hubris. Landscapes are not backdrops for historical action. They are themselves active. Watching landscapes in formation shows humans joining other living beings in shaping worlds. This is a process shot of work on the largest growing ruin called A Dark Drying Scent, now in the SF MoMA collection. It was made and fired in 2 parts in order to fit in our largest kiln at that time. We've got a bigger kiln now. Then both parts were brought together when fired and embedded in a ground of hydrostone. This is an image of half of the piece just fired. It's very fragile here, yet strong at the same time because of the multiple connections, like a spider web. Cracked clay doesn't fall apart here because it's held together with the metal mesh, and in turn, the brittle metal is supported by the sturdy fired clay. Here's the 2 halves now glazed and fired and reunited. Clay walls are built around the halves to hold the hydrostone plaster that will become the ground. Here I'm working with Harlan Goldman Belsma and Maya Buffett Davis, who I first met at UCLA. Here we're pouring the hydrostone plaster. We're getting it to the center despite all of the cages, using a piece of PVC pipe and a bucket with a spout. Here's the clay walls removed. Here's my daughter, Lee, dyeing the plaster. Now it's 4 years later, and she's over a foot taller than in this picture. Bits of detritus were added over weeks of collection and bricolage transformation. Here you can see beer tabs and chicken wire that was found at the beach that coral had begun to grow around. Ice-dyed denim arches were also added so that there was soft and hard arches, as well as the bits of detritus transformed at least twice before going in. Things inside were an old computer mouse covered in tiny disco ball mirrors, bottle caps crushed by cars found in the alley covered in satin, a sneaker full of seashells, an old hair clip gathering headphone wires. I think about homemaking in the ruins. As a contrasting parallel to the Growing Ruin series, I wanted to make an architectural response to the height of the museum gallery at SF MoMA, something that the viewer could inhabit with their bodies and sense scale. Now I see it as a leg of an arch blown up in size. The piece would be called Lean, as it leaned into the top corner of the room. I made cylinder sections and then scratched, pulled, and dented the surface. The sections were built in red, white, and dark brown clays, and over each I applied a pink erbium glaze. Erbium is a rare earth mineral whose cool pink color withstands high firing temperatures. The light reflecting from erbium is delicate and like the dawn light to me. Lean is a sculptural idea that has to be made in real time and space with a good team. At my solo show at SF MoMA, it was important to create a quick bond with the installation team to get the piece safely realized. Here, we're finally getting it into the corner, 11 sections stacked to make 14 feet. Okay, yeah, now you can
start walking up a little bit. So maybe do another spotter on this.
Yeah, I'm going to. Let's get stop right there. I'm coming over.
Okay. Right.
I'm going to leave that yellow there.
Okay, I'm getting off.
There you go. Now you can walk it up.
I love the problem solving in installation. It's challenging and exciting and fun.
The bill starts spinning into the wall.
Which way?
Start letting it down. In this corner.
It needs to come out, yeah?
Is that piece is in the right spot?
Here is Maya pictured with Leap just before the show opened. Oh, Lean, not Leap. This is a piece it's a wall work called From the Corner from 2019. This is the first piece I made where I merged words and abstract form. During COVID, I began an experimental writing practice. I met with friends, artists and writers, online. The words on this piece are from an experiment where we each stood in the corner of our room, facing the corner, letting the white walls fill our field of vision, standing there a long time. Then we returned to our tables and wrote. We were trying to find language from a different part of ourselves. Automatic writing has been used throughout modern art history, as a way to bypass expected or established modes. Here the words came from the physical experience of standing in a corner. Adding to this idea, I returned to my coil-built clay work. Coil building is a classic way of creating a vessel, but for my works, I only merged the coils on the inside, leaving them visible on the outside. In this way, the making process is legible, and the coils also create a great lined surface on which to write. This is from 2021 called Coupled Aspiration, and each piece is about 2 feet wide, made of ceramic, sand, and found rocks. Here, I've scaled up the work. It was cold, winter, in the kiln yard, so that it becomes a large body that the viewer would have to reckon with. I work with a lot of failure when making sculptures, especially large clay work. I'm inventing the process of making as I go along, and usually it's a process of elimination, like how not to do something. But with each failure, I learn how to do it better next time, or something unexpected happens that brings an aha moment to a different area of research. It feels like hopscotching around in the dark sometimes. I had to make the pieces of coil uncoiled 5 times until I had 2 good parts that were intact and not cracked. It turns out that joining coils only on the inside creates a lot of weird stress in the piece that comes out as cracks in the firing. It doesn't help that I work large. Large clay structures are infinitely more fragile in the building and firing stages than small works. Once they're fired, they're good. Here is coil uncoiled, furl unfurled, shown here in 2023. I wrote a verse culled from my automatic writing on the left piece, and in order to read the verse, you have to walk around and around the sculpture to follow the line of words. It's a spiral. The right one was blank, where the coils end and begin on this piece became their own composition. And for fun, I'm going to show you this. It's me pregnant destroying a failed sculpture, documented by Mariah Garnett, soundtrack and editing by Amy Gogan, and it's from 2014. I was destroying the cracked pieces when I realized that some of the fragments were actually more resonant than my previous word works. You don't need a lot of words on sculpture, it turns out. These photos of me holding the fragments were shot by Monica Newens. N.H. Pritchard is a poet I've looked at a lot recently, especially the collected works, The Matrix, from 1960 to 1970. I also taught his work in my graduate seminar called Writing as Parallel Practice last winter. I expanded on this idea of using just a few words and repeating them on my forms. This piece is called All Allow, from my show, The Screaming Cumulus, in 2025. And this is Brenda Reyes Chavez from Commonwealth and Council, pictured alongside the next few artworks. This work is about inner voice and screaming, trying to communicate, listening, and refusing to listen. This is a detail of a piece called Or. These large ear sculptures bent sound as you spoke into them, and that was unplanned because I didn't get to experience them on the wall until we installed them in the space, and so we found this out in the gallery. They also bounce sound in a strange way. If you stand in front of this piece, you can hear sounds from odd and far spots in the room. With this one, I created coils out of hand-dyed fabric and t-shirts that my artist friends had made. They were then tied together as if I were hand-building them out of clay, and this piece is called The Screaming Cumulus. Grind was a major word in the show. Grinding teeth, being on the grind, grinding in the studio. I think my work toggles back and forth between doing research of my own emotive interior using practices such as automatic writing, and then testing those ideas as they make contact with other materials, situations, and people. Some of Eve Fowler's t-shirts that use bits of Gertrude Stein's writing can be seen here, and also some dyed polka dot fabric I found in my attic from a long time ago. This piece is called Discrete Signals, made of mason stain, frit, clay, and glaze. The ear becomes a tongue and the heart becomes a mouth. This is an installation shot of the show. This piece, double chamber, it's almost like a rib cage to me. This piece is called It Is So, Is It So? I thought of a pelvis or a cradle, and the title comes directly from Gertrude Stein vis-a-vis Eve Fowler. When I became a full-time professor at UCLA in the fall of 2019, I was reflective. We don't get anywhere by ourselves, and I wanted to remember who had helped me as I made my way. I realized that my first teaching jobs, fresh out of grad school, were offered to me by Simon Lung and Bruce Yamamoto, two very different artists with distinct long-term and demanding practices. At the same time, as teachers at UC Irvine, they had brought up generations of young artists. After being an artist and adjunct in LA for a long period myself, now it was my job to co-create a vision for the ceramics department at UCLA and populate the art world with who and what I felt was important and had been missing, that reflected the community and place we were in. In 2019, Asian hate was at an all-time high. Elders were being beaten on the sidewalks around their homes. I was connecting with friends and colleagues again on Zoom in order to find solace and to figure out how to retain and use our power during this dark time. A web of artists and collaborators began to appear to me who were arts educators who had serious and long-term art practices that existed outside of the art market. It was a multi-generational and diasporic Asian American group. Anne Elgood and I spent at least 2 years realizing the show and catalog called Scratching at the Moon at the ICA LA. Dorothée Perrette designed the catalog, and Asuka Hisa helped produce the 6-month series of events, panels, and performances that went with the show. This is a picture of the participating artists and curators at the opening, and you can see Young-Soon Min in a hat in the middle of this photo. She passed away during the run of the show, and Candice Lin and other kin organized a memorial for Young-Soon in the exhibition space. Curating was, I had never curated a show before, especially one at this scale, and it was really fun, very exciting, very difficult, but really fun. And I feel so lucky I got to do it with Anne Elgood, who runs the ICA LA. And this is a view of the main gallery with work by Michelle Lopez, Patty Chang, and Bruce Yamamoto. In the foreground, you can see Michelle's Ballast and Barricades, which rethinks structures of crowd and traffic control. This 3-channel video is the collaborative work of Miljan Ruperto and Vishal Jagdeo called Cutline from 2024, which incorporates AI-generated flora and family footage of Guyana, Vish's footage. This is Patty Chang's We Are All Mothers, the result of an extended collaboration with sisters Alexia and Estrida Niemanis, who are marine biologist and ecofeminist and professors. Here's a small gallery that just had Young Chung's work with Young Soon Min. Anne and I convinced Young to show his very early work alongside Young Soon's pivotal works Defining Moments and Springtimes of Castro and Kim. Young Soon was a teacher and mentor of Young's in the 1990s at UC Irvine, and then Young exhibited Young Soon's work years later. Scratching at the Moon highlighted the ways that artists have worked together and influenced one another while having very individual and unique practices. It's more about people going through life together, creating a web of dialogue and collaboration. This is Amanda Ross Ho's piece, or 2 pieces, that reflect on and reuse bits of her artist father's archive, Ruyel Ho, which is also her inheritance. And her mother's a photographer, so she's inheriting 2 archives. This is Na Mira's video and film installation, Hotel, from her series that uses the work of Teresa Hak Kyung Cha as a starting point. And I got to share a gallery with Amy Yao, an artist I played music with 20 years ago and with whom I'm currently in a performance group called FXR. Here are my growing ruin sculptures and veil made of office shirt seams called Multitude Wall. Probably almost 200 office shirt seams were safety pinned together to create this piece, and they're all presented on Amy's white carpet. And here is the other side of the room where you can see Amy's sculpture called Doppelgangers on the floor, as well as her Asian clam series on the wall. This is a close-up of Doppelgangers where you can see real and plastic rice, freshwater and plastic pearls on the white carpet. Her work comments on long-held prejudices that Americans have about Chinese culture and how they're reinforced in the news media. You had to take off your shoes before going in our gallery, and this was the unexpected Asian American living room part of the show. Scratching at the Moon was the first survey museum show focused entirely on Asian American artists in and around Los Angeles. There were only 13 artists in the show, but dozens more could have been included. So we were calling it a focused survey. Each artist in the show was able to make a major contribution by exhibiting their most ambitious work, and there were several commissions of new work for this show. But the trade-off there was that we had a smaller group, yet the web of artist colleagues extends outwards. As part of the programming, I invited FXR to respond to the show. We're also called Faculty Extra Retreat, and we're a group of 7 artists and educators: A. Arakawa, Patty Chang, Pearl Sheng, Amanda Ross Ho, Shirley Say, Amy Yao, and me. Our work focuses on care. Rebecca said all this. How to care for students while navigating educational institutions, how we create art as we navigate art institutions. And we feel the faculty retreat is an apt metaphor. It sounds like we might be going on vacation, but really it's just a very long faculty meeting. There's an absurdity to finding care in an institution. In order to expand the breadth of the survey, FXR created a performance called Force Ghosts, where we projected images of Asian American art and artists who have been influential to us. Julie Tolentino's cultivated crystals are projected here in Force Ghosts on Simon Lung's installation. Julie was a character in Simon's Act Two, an opera made with composer Luke Stoneham, which was featured in Scratching at the Moon. This is an image of Tseng Kwang-chi projected over Dean Samashima's photo series, Being Alone, which was taken in porn theaters around Berlin. Dean's pictures were. Force Ghosts culminated in Bruce Yamamoto's installation Hana-Bi Fireworks, with all FXR members projecting images in a layered collage on top of Bruce's piece. Okay, so this is the last project I will talk about tonight, unless we talk about something else in the Q&A. But back outside at the State Historic Park, the shallow bowl of decomposed granite had been eroding over time. The sculpture's substructure was emerging, which I hated to see. You can see at the foot of each arch, you can see like the steel substructure. And this photo is from early 2025. Psychic Body Grotto was not commissioned by the park, yet it's sited there. It's a self-started independent project. Psychic Body Grotto has become a beloved feature of the park and is protected by the park's rangers and workers, but we don't have formal protocols around it. A maintenance routine was overdue for this piece, which was installed in 2017. Land and I teamed up again, and this time I circled in FXR. We created a performance called Psychic Body Recalibration, which was motivated by the need for maintenance, and we performed this ritual on Mother's Day 2025. Here's a fresh load of decomposed granite, which has been brought to the site, and we're shaping and tamping it. During this stage, a lot of information was exchanged from me about what the shape of the bowl should be, and from the parks workers on how to shape and tamp decomposed granite. And more importantly, there emerged between us a better understanding of what the sculpture is and how it functions in the park now, 8 years later. Now it's 9. Psychic Body Recalibration. This is the basic score of actions we plan to take over the hours under the sun on Mother's Day last year. Prep, inventory, tamp, rest, dust, potion, wash, treat, swaddle, end. In the background of this image, one of several moving blankets is seen containing the inventory of the materials and tools we would use: scissors, fabrics, ladles, dusters, Gatorade, straw hats, work gloves, sunblock, string, sandwiches. Tamping, we tamped down the DG. Resting, we had to be sure to hydrate and rest in this hot afternoon sun. Dusting, we dusted the spider webs, and also spiders love to lay eggs in the tiny crevices in that sculpture. We dusted the debris. Potion, we created a large potion in a large pot, a couple pots, using the native plants nearby and the cleansers and medicinals that we brought, such as tiger balm, vinegar, wine, aspirin. Washing, we washed the sculpture in the potion. Swaddle, we swaddled it in cloths dipped in the potion. End. This is the swaddling fabric. It's a fuchsia satin, which I've been using in performances since 2019, which has been accruing a kind of dusty power and aura. In the beginning, I had at least 1,200 yards of this for a project I did with out in the desert. This is dusting, and you can see Pearl Shung in the foreground. This is mixing the potion. Swaddling the sculpture with cloth dipped in potion. And at this point, the audience, who had gathered on picnic blankets in the shade around Psychic Body Grotto, began to get up and help us. Swaddling. Here on the left is Patty Chang, and on the right is Shirley Say. And we left Psychic Body Grotto just like this for a week for the potion to set in. It was on view to park goers this way until the annual Kite Festival 7 days later. One week later, we performed in private the closing of Psychic Body Recalibration. For the closing, we decided to bring our ritual materials to Pearl Shung's High Prismatic, a 60-foot tall glass mosaic at the Bunker Hill station of the Metro, which had been unveiled to the public in 2023. It too needed a cleanse after spending 2 years in the soot of the Metro. Here we're unwinding the swaddling, and A and his baby twins have joined us this time. Here we're walking all of our materials to the Chinatown station at the south end of the park. Riding the Metro. Bringing our materials to High Prismatic at the Bunker Hill station. Dusting the mural, which is covered in fine soot. And this is the grand finale of our recalibration, where we're using telescoping poles with dusters attached to reach as high as possible, all while caring for A's babies, who were pretty hungry by then. Yeah, you have 3 levels of cleanse. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We're going to open it up to questions now, and there will be 2 ushers with microphones. So if you can raise your hand, they will find you and give you a microphone so you can ask Anna a question.
Hey, Anna, it's Libby. How are you?
Hi there, Libby.
I have so many questions, but they're all very short, and I'm gonna say them, and you can decide which one to answer. So, legibility in text, why? Second question, parenting and
I feel
art.
like I should take notes.
Parenting and art, how? Third question, well, you kind of answered this one, but what have you learned as a teacher? And you kind of go into it with faculty, XTRA or something like that. And then, well, I'm not going to ask the other question. Anyways, yeah, those are my 3 questions. So answer now or later. Thanks.
What have I learned as a teacher is such a great question. When I was first teaching, what I learned as a teacher is what I know about art, and what I think about art, because you don't really, the way I came to teaching, I didn't really learn how to teach art. I had to learn on the job, and really what I ended up doing was just teaching what I knew art to be, and in externalizing it, in saying it out loud and explaining it to people, I understood what I thought about art and what perhaps my contribution could be or is. I think after teaching for some years, what I'm always learning, and what I'm learning changes over time. Now I'm just learning really how to be in conversation with people more and more, and how important that is, and how important listening is. Yeah, and also that learning and knowing is really fluid. Like, you can know something one day and not know it another day. It could be true one day or not true another day. Yeah. I can answer the other ones unless somebody else has a question. Anyone?
Hi, thank you for your talk. My question might be related to the first question from the previous question, which is, I was interested in when you spoke about poetry and automatic writing, and I was interested if you could talk more about the relationship between language and your work, or what specifically about poetry interests you.
That is a great question, and I think the way I'm using automatic writing as it relates to the sculpture is really about trying to be present and being able to explain that presence with words. There's something about the act of making sculpture or making art, like the amazing thing about it is that you have to be present when you're making it. You can't really think about like, oh, that text or what somebody else said, or there's something. In order for these materials like clay, which is like so difficult to control, it's always about to create some kind of mess or chaos. Like, you have to be really present and really be in your body. I feel like when I'm working with a material, that movements of my limbs is extremely, I'm just really present to the movement that I'm making. It's part of that focus. And I wanted to bring that kind of presentness and embodiedness into the viewer's consciousness when they're looking at the work. I wanted to share that kind of, that being in the moment. And so I didn't know that's what I wanted, but as I was making the writing, I realized that's what I was coming out. And so that's why I continue to use writing as a tool, because it's leading me to what I didn't know I needed to do, or where I didn't know I wanted to go. It's also, and this is what we talk about in the grad seminar, writing as parallel practice, which I will probably teach again. that it's like really good to do stuff that you don't know how to do or that you think you're not good at. As you guys saw, like with the big sculptures, like I often don't know in a way what I'm doing, although I've been doing this unknowing way for a long time, so I don't feel that scared all the time as much. But I think it's good to be in that place of not quite knowing what you're doing, things being almost out of control, because that's how you can find something unexpected that hasn't existed before. I mean, not to be too overblown, but like, you know, at least new for you, right? So.
I have a question, but I don't know. But I can't hold the microphone. I don't have an externalized question. But I was I guess I was thinking about the writing and curious if you maintain like a writing practice. It sounded like when you started using the words that the writing was a new thing for you. Are you still? Do you have like a daily writing practice or a way of keeping that?
Is that Karin?
Yes.
Hi, Karin. You know what? I loved it when you told me after looking at one of my sculptures that you walked around and around and read the whole thing. I appreciated that a lot. When I was small, I was a bookworm. So I've always loved reading, and when I moved here, I would kind of what's that called when you just sit in on? I would sit in on classes, creative writing classes. So I
or spectate.
Yeah.
I prefer spectate.
Okay. I can say sit in, audit, spectate. Yeah. Ben Weissman welcomed me into his class when I first moved here. There was a class, like kind of a workshop in her apartment. Lori Weeks, who is an amazing writer from the East Village in New York, who wrote this novel called Zipper Mouth. But many of us were in that workshop kind of in the aughts, or maybe in the, what's that called, the teens, early teens, the tweens. In Echo Park, Mariah Garnett was in that workshop. Na Mira was in that workshop. Lee Relvis, who's an artist in New York. And Lori Weeks said something that I try to remember to tell my students because it's such a great thing to say, but just to remember that whatever you make is as important as the Mona Lisa. And you have to make the thing. You just have to make it. It's important. And so I've kept it as something that I did, but it wasn't really something that I brought into my work until the past few years, really spurred by COVID, because that was the only way to hang out with people. We were all sheltering in place. And so I started writing again with real writers, poets, and I've been writing regularly with a poet called Jae Yoon Choi. And I love being in this space of not knowing how to do something. There's a lot of freedom in that. And that's also kind of how I came to clay and stuck to it, because of the freedom I felt when I was using it. So I recognize that feeling when I'm doing something, and then I stay by that because I know that's something juicy. So I try to write every day, to answer your question.
I have just one more thing I wanted that's more of an observation is, well, there's some of your work that I really love, and I don't think you showed pictures of the kind of mirror. I think of them as mirrors, but they're these wall-hanging shapes with little hooks on them. that to me always feel like related to the face somehow. And then the coil pieces with the text are so body-like, and then you have the text on those. But then you have the cage pieces, which are really incredible, are so architectural or like outside of the body. And it's just something I hadn't really seen so clearly until your presentation today, that to me, it seems like you have these kind of two themes that are separated, and one is more like an abstraction of the body, parts of the body, the ears, and then these spaces that you can inhabit that are outside of the body. So, do you? I guess I don't know what the question is. Do you think about them as being sort of different?
Yeah, I do. And I think you're making me remember this amazing artwork by Barbara Kruger called Your Gaze Hits the Side of My Face. And it really is about being someone that's looked at, right? And often that's a woman. And so from such a young age, many of us have that experience of like having an out-of-body experience where you're like looking at yourself moving through life. How do I look? I'm watching myself do this kind of self-consciousness or body consciousness, and then also trying to then be present in your body and not not exist that way, and just kind of be without having to be conscious of what you look like. And so what you're saying is making me think of that, and I've always loved that artwork by Barbara Kruger.
You talked a lot about using found materials in your work. I was curious to hear a little bit more about kind of the process around that and what those materials mean to you when you're using them.
I can start with jeans, which is like a very common one, or I could start with the bikes, those kiddie bikes from early work. But we can talk about jeans. I mean, I didn't talk about that work that's on the screen right now, which I think is called The Wettest Letter. But there's something about, I mean, making abstract sculpture is an interesting thing to do because it feels like it's almost like a dinosaur, and so difficult to talk about. That's another reason why putting words on abstract sculpture is interesting to me, because it seems like abstract sculpture is something that pushes language, like verbal language, away. It's about being present in space with a thing, which is almost like dinosaur land. Like we're like in AI, like virtual texting world. We're not trying to like have large objects to contend with in our space. So there's something about having a found thing with the sculpture that really acts as a focus point, a place to rest or a place to think and a place to relax. Everybody has an experience of wearing their favorite jeans, the jeans you borrowed from your friend that you never gave back, or the jeans that you hate now because boot cut, who wears boot cut? And when you look at the jeans on the sculpture, it opens up a lot of opportunity for associations. And I think having the found object that's familiar as a handle is great, because then you can spend time in front of the work. Your associations can continue to change and pass through you, and actually you're looking at the sculpture and you're dealing with the abstract form and the scale and So it's like a gateway, I would say.
Hi, I am interested in the video, the sculpture that you destroyed, and I was wondering if you could talk, A, about failure, and B, I think there were images of similar work that looks like it was being exhibited, and if you could talk about that work in particular, which I thought was really interesting and beautiful.
Similar work.
This sort of round with the like mirror in the center.
Ah, right. There was so much work it was hard to figure out which work to talk about. So that's also kind of what Karin was referring to. That's two questions. So the one was about failure and one was about that work. I think, again, that like, for me, I need to be uncomfortable when I'm making the work, and I need for the work in the end to cause discomfort in a way in the viewer. And that often means that, like I'm just doing stuff that I don't know where it's going to lead. I stay in this weird, confused, unable to see zone. That's how I find things. That's how I find what's important. I don't know why that is. It's just the way it is. And failure is just a big part of that, kind of swimming around in some murky water. It means risk. It means risk, it means challenge. And I think keeping those things very present, those modes really present in the studio is important. It's just that how the work stays alive and vital. It's not like it doesn't hurt. It really hurt. It really sucks. Like the piece, the large pink coil works, like those were supposed to ship to San Francisco in a few weeks, and when that cracked, it was pretty devastating because it meant those things. Large clay sculpture takes weeks to dry, and it has to be thoroughly dry before you can fire it. So I was just like counting back the days that I had left when that thing broke. So it's not that it doesn't hurt. It's just I know that it's part of the process. And those forms, it's hard to talk about them when they're not here. I guess they're in our memory, that round form. But I'm like, what would our daily life be like if we were not always walking around in squares? So that work is part of that conversation. I'll just leave it there. We can talk more about those forms later.
We just have time for one last question, and Rebecca is indicating something.
There's a person who's had their hand up. Oh, yes, you.
Okay, so this will be the final question.
Up on the alley. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, thanks, Rebecca. It's very sweet of you. I know I had so many
questions. So I had another question. I'm gonna assume, Anna, that Psychic Body Grotto wasn't your first performance, and also Faculty XTR wasn't your first performance. So I'm wondering, what were your first performances like, and also how do you they're so calculated now, they're calculated now, but they're also have room for freedom and mistakes and error, and they embrace all of that and improvisation, which is amazing. How did you rein that in? How did you do that?
They're calculated yet with improvisation. I mean, I guess I would say the first performances that I did as perhaps early performances were about trying to demonstrate what the sculptures could do. I feel like a lot of what I do with this work is trying to translate the work that I make. It's funny, like these abstract forms, like what are they? And then I do all this work, whether it's writing or performance, to kind of model what these things are, to show what these things are. I would say with FXR, like there's the whole history of fluxus and happenings, and, it's like people working together to be in a situation. And yeah, you are right, Libby, that there is it's like, it's not totally controlled, but it's not totally chaos. It's kind of something, it's like there's a structure that we have created through a lot of careful planning and a lot of work with the hosting institution. I mean, I think that work, FXR, is really a lot about showing and bringing up, highlighting the conversations between artist and institution and making that part of the work. I guess in that sense, it's different from happenings where people were like meeting in their lofts in the 70s in New York in the 60s, and people were doing things in their loft, and it didn't have such a long conversation with an institution. But I think that improvisation is a really important part of this work, and also in the sculpture. I feel like I'm getting a little off topic, but rambling about performance, but it feels like an important part of the practice that I've had in different capacities over time, and FXR is just the latest way that I've been working with performance, and it's really fun, and it's great to have this group that feels like, also like a family. That feels like something I feel very lucky about. But I've been doing performance for a long time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.